All right, so welcome to lesson number 8 in emotional science. And we're going to dive into this lesson, which is about wide focus, proactive emotions together. So intentionally building our emotional world together instead of just by yourself. So we're going to review some of the steps that we took by ourselves, moving from tight to wide focus. So beyond focusing on the next task, we're focusing on why we're doing what we're doing as a group. Why are we here? Why are we working together? What's the big idea, which is valuing people? We're creating value for others. We're creating value for our team. So these are all critical questions that we need to ask as a team and have these team discussions intentionally. Again, it's focusing on what Dr. Sue Johnson said is our deepest feelings of being valued. This is the critical thing. When we feel valued together, we can acknowledge it together, we're going to release something truly powerful. So we're going to be looking at several questions that will help us to focus on community, team, and self. Now, these are the three stakeholders that we have within any organization: the community, the team, and the self. So we're going to broaden our focus out to what does it mean to value? How does your product or service value the people who use it? So how do we create value for those around us? If we're serving coffee, is the service great? Is the coffee great? If we're creating some sort of electronic product, is it going to be excellent? Is it going to last the test of time? Is it going to do exactly what it needs to be doing? So these are all the different things that you need to be considering for the community's sake. Are we valuing our community? Are we valuing others that are out there actually consuming our service and our product? So the next question is a team focus. How does your particular tasks show how you value the team when you do it in the way you do? So that's a big question. How do your particular tasks show how you value the team? The small things that you do. How are you valuing others by the small things that you do and how you do them? You might be doing great things for others, but are you doing it with an attitude that conveys, hey, I'm willingly and excitingly doing this for you because that's what I'm all about? Evaluate that amongst yourselves. And then the final question is focused towards the self, the final stakeholder here. How do you feel when you value every detail of your work? What helps you value your tasks more? Now, of course, this is focused towards yourself, but when you discuss these tasks, these elements together, it changes the dynamic. So each individual is sort of intentionally sharing some of this self-valuing focus with the team. So those are ways to dive into this. And now let's look at the science. This is the technique that they're using in this scientific approach that's been proven in the workforce for decades to be effective, is pivoting towards values, intentionally creating an emotional world. Instead of just being reactive, we're going to make an intentional, proactive emotional world that you have control over. You can control that. You just can't control the reactive emotional self. So that's what ACT is focusing on. Now, more to understand, emotions themselves are contagions. It takes a few seconds to catch another emotion. It's like, how many of you have seen somebody cutting some food and then suddenly they cut themselves and you just react with them like, ouch, I don't want that to happen. Or you see a commercial where somebody's like sniffling and you start to sneeze, and they've documented like when one person yawns, how long it takes for somebody else to yawn. These are all things that we connect with each other so much that we catch each other's emotions, and it takes a fraction of a second. So it's contagious, but it can last for a few minutes, or it can last up to 5 days for us to catch the weight of somebody's emotions. So very critical thing to be using this tool within groups, because we network, we pass them to each other through our vagal nervous system that communicates emotions through our face, through our body, through our systems. So we can't hide these things. So if we cultivate them and cultivate a lot of proactive emotions, we're going to be in a good space. You're going to be in a great space scientifically. So flocking is the other thing that we do. Flocking, we've heard of fight and flight. Now here's another one, flocking. Now, I live in a rural area. And so when you're driving along and then suddenly one deer in a flock puts up their head, then all of the other ones stop. And then when that deer gets up and runs, they all run in the same direction. They never go, "Huh," and one goes running off in a different direction. They all flock together. And unfortunately, there's a story that exemplifies this. There were two floors of the same company in one of the World Trade Center towers. The plane had already hit one of the World Trade Center towers. And unfortunately, the leadership of the top floor said, everything's fine. It's just one of those drills, just an accident that happened in that other tower over there. It had happened in 1993, a few years ago. So don't be worried. Just keep working, stay at your desks. Everything's fine. And then the second floor, the lower floor, one of the leaders put on his racing shoes, his running shoes, and got up and said, everybody out, this is terrorism, we got to get out of here now. And everyone on that floor, 81 souls, got up and got out of that building and started down the stairwell, and were all saved. The difference was that they flocked together. One floor heard the message of danger, get out, and they followed the leader out the door because they were flocking together in the response to a major explosion from the other building. And the other floor flocked together and stayed. Everything was safe, according to their leaders, and so they stayed. So it can have tragic consequences. It can have positive consequences. So intentionally creating where you want to go ahead of time is very important, because when that time comes, you'll all move together in the same direction. It's an instinct that we have as humanity. So creating proactive emotional worlds focused on values is critical ahead of time, because you can't do it in the moment. So the science, the benefits are 5 times more powerful when you do it together. If you just do this proactive work by yourself, it's not nearly as effective as it when you could do it together with a huge group of people. A huge group of people pulling together is so much more powerful than just one guy on the other side. And even pulling kind of rhythmically in sync, you'll be able to create rhythms of power and strength that is going to be unstoppable. Again, you'll see higher job satisfaction, fulfillment in your job, stress resilience, high performance, innovation, all of those things on an even more magnified level when you can do this together. So it's a very powerful tool to be able to do this in groups, in teams. Now, our story time, again, with motivational interviewing. We hope that these motivational interviewing sections help you to dive into the whole world of open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries, moving people from ambivalence to change. And you can do this in a powerful way when you're doing intentional conversations about values. So here's our story about this group of James, Beth, Elisa, and Tisha. And let's listen to how they confronted their situation and created some intentional value.
So it seems like we're all feeling a bit worn out by the challenges we face in our work. Can anyone pinpoint a specific moment that stood out to them recently?
Well, there was this patient yesterday who was constantly complaining and seemed really ungrateful for everything we were doing for them.
That sounds tough. How did you feel in that moment, Tisha?
Honestly, I felt frustrated. Like, why bother putting in so much effort if it's not appreciated?
I understand. And James, have you encountered similar situations?
Yeah, plenty. It's like no matter what we do, some patients just don't seem to care.
It can be disheartening when our efforts don't seem to be recognized. Beth, how do you usually handle these kinds of situations?
I try to remind myself why I got into this profession in the first place, but it's not always easy.
That's understandable. Let me ask you all this. Have there been times when you've seen a shift in a patient's attitude based on how they were treated?
Well, yeah, I guess sometimes when I take the time to really listen to them, they seem to open up more.
That's interesting. James, any thoughts on that?
Actually, now that I think about it, there was one patient who was really resistant to treatment at first, but after a few conversations where I made an effort to connect with them, they seemed to be more receptive.
It sounds like when we invest in valuing our patients as individuals, it can have a positive impact on their experience and even their recovery. What do you all think about that?
You know, now that you mention it, I can recall a few instances where taking the time to really connect with a patient made a noticeable difference.
Yeah, I can definitely see the correlation now. It's like our attitude towards them affects how they respond to treatment.
I agree. It's like when we show that we genuinely care, it changes the dynamic entirely.
Exactly. So let's remember that as we go about our shifts. Our work isn't just about administering treatments. It's about valuing the people we serve. And when we do that, we not only make a difference in their lives, but in our own as well. Thank you all for sharing today. Let's keep striving to make that positive impact every day.
All right, so now let's jump into our group questions. Question number 1, how does it change your perspective to see our work as valuing others? Question number 2, what would help to keep this perspective of valuing on a day-to-day basis? Question number 3, how would these types of conversations affect you and your team if done regularly? Question number 4, how does it empower you when your team is a source of emotional health? All right. So that's wide focus, proactive emotions together, teaming together around creating proactive emotions. So similar to doing it by yourself, we're doing it as a team. We're focusing further beyond ourselves, and we're focusing on how we affect the community, how we affect our teams, and how we affect ourselves. And we saw a multiplication effect that happens when we do this in a group. It magnifies the intensity of our proactive emotions to have the same values and to have these conversations together. It increases our job satisfaction and our life satisfaction and increases our emotional energy as well. So it's a very powerful tool to be working on this together as a team. So that's lesson number 8. And we'll go on to our final lesson, number 9, in a moment.